Perfect. All right. Well, why don't we get into this just in the interest of time? And to start with, it's just a real pleasure to be here and be asked, a real privilege to be asked to contribute to Break the Silence initiative, where we're bringing the community together to walk and talk about mental health. I am really excited to chat a little bit about resilience in the brave new workplace. So a little bit about me. My name is Dr. Karen MacNeill, and by trade and training, I'm a sport and performance psychologist. So I've attended multiple Olympic Games. I'm the mental performance and mental health lead with the Canadian Olympic Committee, and have worked with organizations. I'm also a registered psychologist. So I work with a variety of individuals on mental health issues. And in my spare time, I'm also the founder of Headversity, and we're a mental wellness platform that is designed to measure, track, and train resilience in the workplace. And so today I'm going to be bringing all that knowledge and information to talk to you about resilience in the brave new workplace. So really for today, let's see if I can get my screen to move here. There we go. What I want to chat a bit about is this brave new workplace that we've all been forced in given our current pandemic. I want to shed some light on the psychology of return to work, some things that we're seeing, and also some things that you can take into consideration as you may transition back to work. And then do a bit of a deeper dive into how do we build resilience, what's the model, and then talk about a few tools. So getting right into it, the brave new workplace. In March, we all experienced what can be known as a where were you when moment. The World Health Organization announced a pandemic, and we all needed to adjust and adjust quickly. As this was an unprecedented event, there was no rule book. And so there was a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability that went along with that situation. Nonetheless, we all had to enter this brave new workplace, or what Headversity is referring to as the brave new workplace, which is really a mentality with some shared attributes. We needed to be enabled by technology. So hence, we're able to reach all you fine folks through video and through different means. With that also comes this constant state of learning and development as we adopt new information, so that can increase the stress load. We need to become unfazed by remote working, and that was not the norm before. And so what has happened is there's the lines that have become blurred between home and work. And so needing to learn and understand how to create those boundaries. Any minute, she does it every time, my beautiful little 7-year-old will walk through that door. So we've just had to learn how to adjust with that. In addition to embracing the new routine. So we don't have that commute time. However, we also don't have that separation. And so we're seeing higher levels of isolation and fatigue than ever before, which is also going to create those emotional reactions. And so with that high levels of stress, high levels of uncertainty, it would be absolutely normal if you're feeling like you're on this emotional roller coaster. And the things with our our emotions, it can create an overly anxious mind, which will get us to overestimate danger and underestimate our ability to cope with it. And so really getting in touch with how we're reacting and responding and really becoming aware is ever so critical. And so as I put some of these words up on my screen here, I just want you to read through some of those words and maybe have a look at what words resonate with you, or what emotions have you experienced over this 3-4 month period. And if you're anything like me, there will be multiple ones on this screen. And the thing we have to recognize as our emotions are normal and they are valid. It's just our system doing their job. And that's the thing, our emotions give us information of what we need and what's important to us. The trick is to make sure that we are able to have that emotional agility. That comes from Susan David's work, which is we're able to experience the emotions, understand them, acknowledge them, and accept them, but use them as data in terms of what is it telling me that's important to me versus the director, and making us have a lot of emotion-driven behavior. For example, if you're one that is feeling a bit anxious and overwhelmed, rightfully so, given we're not sure where things stand, then being emotionally driven, having that as the director, it may lead you into overfunctioning or into micromanaging, you know, if you're working with employees at work. Versus as data saying, yeah, I need that sense of safety. I need that sense of security. I need that sense of calm within me. And so I'm using that as data and I go get those needs met. And this is the thing with the emotions, is it can lead us into elevated stress response. And so when we look at the psychology of a human, we react in a variety of ways. We have our emotions. We have the body that's turning on. We have our mind that's going to tell us a certain narrative or a certain story. And we have the behaviors that go along with it. And so really, stress is really the balance between perceived demands and perceived resources. And so when we feel there's an imbalance, when we feel there's a threat in our environment, then our natural stress response is going to kick in. And this is actually a helpful thing. It helps us focus. It helps us turn on so that we can engage and do what's required in the environment. The challenge is when this is turned on for a long period of time. So once again, being aware of how you're responding. So just want you to take a moment and reflect on that. What are your top sources of stress right now? And how might you be reacting when you look at these models, to this model? Do any of these symptoms, signs and symptoms, look normal to you? And the thing is, it's a normal response to this situation. It's a matter of making sure we're able to regulate it. Because as I said, the stress response can be quite helpful to us. But if it's on for a chronic or prolonged period of time, then that can lead into some issues. High stress, lack of coping can lead into some of those mental health issues. And so this is the thing. We've heard of the term, or you may have heard of the term, of the echo pandemic. And this is where some of our leaders and thought leaders and advocates in mental health are calling for increased in resources. This was a quote I grabbed from the CBC, and this was prior to the shootings in Nova Scotia. The Canadian Mental Health Association said that normally that they'll get 25 calls in a day, where that shot up to 700. And so as we're flattening the physical health curve, we also want to make sure there's not a mental health spike, but that we're flattening that. And so, you know, partly it's getting people resources, and that's hence why we're having these conversations and this initiative in breaking the silence, so we can get people resourced. As a practitioner, it's really important to take that preventive and proactive. Let's get ahead of it. So let's develop you with some skills and some tools to help regulate that stress, help regulate that emotions, and build your resilience. And so that's going to be one of the key things that we need to be thinking about. And so before we go into how we build resilience, let's talk a little bit about the psychology of returning to work. And so I'm just going to pause and see, has any questions come up before I get into that? And I'll just look to the chat here, but Amber, you can let me know. Okay, good. So yeah, please, if you guys have any questions about anything that I have presented so far, I can't see anyone, which is kind of strange. So please just put that into the chat box and we're happy to answer anything. There'll also be some time at the end of this, so we can answer some questions at that time as well. Okay, I will move on with this then as we're going forward here. Okay, so when we look at the psychology of return to work, the first thing we've got to understand, let's get to that, is that there's going to be a range. So the return to work, there's going to be a range of individual responses. And so we want to have one group that just want to get back at it, minimal issues, want to get back into the workforce and continue to perform the role amongst all their peers. We have another group that's actually feeling quite fearful and anxious around this. either around getting sick or around this second wave and what that's going to look like. And with that group, we've got to imagine if there's a high level of fear and that doesn't dissipate, or a high level of anxiety, going into the stressful environment is only going to exacerbate or increase that over time. So either need to make sure that we're giving resources, or making sure that there's that psychological readiness. And then lastly, we're going to have a group of people who have been personally impacted by this, or experienced this, what we call secondary trauma, which is a high level of distress by witnessing personal impacts to others as well. And so once again, making sure that we're aware of all these different responses, and the different responses are going to need different supports. So you personally may fit into all these buckets, and what you need for each one might be slightly different. And so as we're considering return to work procedures, we need to make sure we're attending to all the needs. It's not just a one size fits all approach. And so a few other reactions that we're seeing and hearing about. And so one thing that's been acknowledged is this re-entry anxiety. And so it's a form of stress that is being associated with the fear of being unable or unwanting to return. And it's really establishing or reestablishing or re-entering into those pre-established routines. So, the effort of commuting, the, anticipation of what are the new rules and regulations and procedures we need to go through, worrying about the higher and faster pace than what you've experienced at home. So that could be quite prevalent, and we need to watch out for that and just have real patience with people. I think another thing that's been acknowledged is when we were put into this situation and we were all relegated to remote working conditions, that was not the norm. So we had to adjust, and it wasn't so familiar. So we gave ourselves a bit of a break, and we're doing the best we can. Well, now we're going back into an environment where we actually have a mental map of, I go up this elevator, I go to this floor, I go to this coffee room, and I go sit at this chair and I interact in this way. But that's going to be completely different in terms of how you're able to interact with a very familiar environment. So once again, more of a cognitive load and some time to readapt or create those new habits. Precaution versus paranoia. And so this is the other thing is what employers and individuals need to watch out for is the rumor mill. And that proverbial water cooler and the information that's being shared, and someone might get some information off of social or hear something and then spread that. So I think the big thing is to really focus on the facts. Watch the rumor type conversations versus making sure that we're checking in and making sure that we have factual information that we're embedding or that you are working from. And I think the other thing is, given all these things, there's going to be a higher level of mental fatigue and cognitive overload for some. And so really being patient in the approach that we are taking. And so considerations, given some of these things and some of these potential reactions that you may be noticing, is number one, the clarity of the return to work procedures. And so I think for organizations, have those buttoned up as best you can so everyone's aware. And we're now going into phase 2, so some people have already done this, but make sure the information is really clear. For the individuals returning, create that mental map for yourself. So really understanding what this may mean and how that may be different for you. I'm just going to throw these all up here. Okay. The other thing is attending to those individual differences. And so what we want to make sure you're doing is, in addition to the procedural information that you're sharing, having leaders and managers check in with a psychological readiness. How are you feeling about returning to work? Are you living with anyone who's a vulnerable population? Are you vulnerable? How are you feeling mentally? How are you feeling physically? And so really to explore that for yourself, in addition, if you are a leader, to explore it with your employees, and just that basic human first approach. Checking in, making sure that I think more, I've heard of some organizations having basically a morning huddle once a week or sometimes twice a week as they're just starting to get in. So they're just checking. And I've heard from a colleague, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So sharing stories and experiences and using it as an opportunity to really bond as a team. And then I think a big one is that adaptation. So really, there's going to be a plan, but it may need to change, and we're just adapting with that. So creating that space for processing. So as a leader with your employees, creating that space for processing and having conversations, and as an individual, making sure you're being patient with yourself as you're continually readjusting some of those expectations. And then lastly, with all of this, building your resilience, having a resilience plan so that you can tolerate the stress and handle the challenges that may come your way, but also execute. This can be actually a new beginning for many people, which could be quite interesting. And so let's shift into that a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about building your resilience. First of all, you've probably heard that term before multiple times, and you know, part of it, the one school of thought is that it's the ability to bounce back. So it's in that reactive state, and that's where we build resilience. We're at Headversity, really looking at it as that proactive construct, where it's a matter of building the insight and awareness, building those tools so that I am ready to weather any storm. And if you take my world, for instance, which is, you know, high performance sport or working with organizations, but if we take my ski racer who has trained her whole life to get to the Olympic Games, maybe 10, 12, 15 years. And I'm not just preparing her for the bluebird sunny day where the conditions are perfect. We're preparing her for the snowstorm that may be there, the -40 weather, the individual that just got airlifted off the hill, and now she has 1 minute to execute based on all that, those years of training. And so resilience really, when we're looking at it from a Headversity standpoint, we really look at it as the readiness to face adversity. So you're equipped with the skills and the tools and the awareness needed to weather any storm. And doesn't it feel like this some days where we are leading right into a headwind? And so building these skills will help us to handle a variety of different elements. And to be clear, resilience isn't necessarily, when we say adversity, it's those challenges we face. I needed resilience for childbirth. My husband needed resilience for our wedding, right? So it's a matter of using it for all those everyday challenges that we do face. So let's look a little bit at the resilience model that we've developed at Headversity. And this comes from, you know, it's steeped in the science and the literature of what's required to build resilience, but also in our applied experience, collective experience of 30 years in the field, you know, from psychiatry, from performance psychology, working with individuals who have had to endure difficult conditions or need to perform in rugged environments. And so the first aspect of resilience is self-expertise. This is really knowing your why, knowing who you are at the core, your brand and how you want to show up consistently, and then what are those strengths or those superpowers? Mindfulness, our ability to be here now is ever so important. Mental fitness, those are the tools around our ability to regulate our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So tools like poise, focus, and confidence are going to be within those skills, that skill set. Mental health, which is really around knowing where we are on this mental health continuum and what are some of the things we can do to protect and promote mental health, in addition to creating a culture of care. Hardiness, that ability to endure difficult conditions. And what are some of the skill sets? The 3 C's, optimism, building bravery. And then lastly, energy management. So regulating our energy, getting those dose of recovery on a daily basis, eating for energy, moving and sleeping are going to be a part of that. And this we've all put onto a mental wellness platform, so onto our app. today what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through two of our sections, mental health and hardiness, and just give you a bit of a teaser and a tool. So talk a little bit about the concept and then get right into hardiness. So before I move on, I'm just going to pause there for a sec, and I'm just going to shoot over and see if we have any questions. Foundation YouTube channel each day. Okay, thank you. Okay, so just question about the video. I understand they're going to be uploaded to the Mental Health Foundation. So if anybody wants to see some of the videos, there's some great talks. I looked at the lineup, and I'm going to be joining some as well. So anyone else have any questions, then don't hesitate to just put it in the chat box, and we'll go from there. Okay. Every time I stop, it goes. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about mental health. And that's really why we're all here today, is it's really to have these conversations. And the very first thing I want you to do is I just want you to look at these words and notice your reaction. Just notice what's coming up for you in terms of some of those thoughts, what's going on in your body, what might be some of the preconceived notions or the biases you may have. And once again, there's no wrong or right way to feel or think. This is just talking about the messages you've got over the years or your experience with this. And so the thing that we need to realize is how we view mental health is going to change the way our behaviors and how we interact with others around it. So this is why we're doing a lot of this great education on this topic. And really simply, mental health is our ability to experience joy in our life and cope with the demands. And so, you know, I think it's a matter of seeing it more, not necessarily from that disease model where it's, you know, there's 1 in 5, but more from the mental health model and the proactive and preventive, where it's a 5 in 5 issue, and mental health impacts all of us. And so we need to take measures to protect and promote our mental health. And so let's have a quick look at what Headversity calls understanding your head zones. And your head zones are really suggesting that mental health is not an all or nothing thing, but rather exists along a continuum. And we've kind of, once again, used this metaphor of red brain, where we're unwell. We're insular, we're overly anxious, really difficult to perform the tasks of daily life, right up to gray brain, where we're doing okay, we're having some ups and downs, and then blue brain, where we're thriving, we're embracing the challenge, and we're able to step into our purpose and really lead with that. And so once again, just because we don't have a mental illness doesn't mean we're completely mentally healthy. A good metaphor for this is physical health. So just because we don't have a physical illness doesn't mean we're physically fit. And so if you take the example of an individual who, you know, is, there isn't a physical illness present, but maybe they're sitting on the couch, eating Doritos on a daily basis, not getting out, not moving, not engaging with life, up to the person who's doing exercise on a daily basis, connecting with others, eating healthy, right? And they'll move up the continuum. And so they're further away from the risk of a physical illness. The same goes for mental health. But the trick is we know the algorithm for physical health. We've been told for hundreds of years. Our mom has been telling us to eat our veggies, get our sleep, go out and play, get our exercise, and manage our stress. Well, what's that algorithm for our mental health? How do we move up this continuum and make sure that we're promoting mental health? Also acknowledging those with mental illness. It can be a real struggle. And so just holding space for that as well. It's not as easy as just doing this one thing, right? It can be more complex than that. So just want to honor that, while also suggesting there's a few things we can do to promote mental health. And so first of all, let's look at your own head zone. And so what we've done here is we've put down a few descriptions underneath each of these. And on our mental wellness platform, on our individual personalized trainer, resilience trainer at Headversity, we have a head zones where you can track this every day. But if you just do a bit of an eyeball for yourself right now, where would you notice? Where would you put yourself on this continuum today? And so partly it's to be aware of, and you know what, where would you have put yourself yesterday? Where would you put yourself the day before? You may be in similar zones, or it may be a little bit all over the place, depending on your situation. And it's important to identify and acknowledge that, because the interventions or what we need to do may differ. And so shifting your mental health zone, there's something we can do in each one of these lanes. And so if we just take mental health, for example, when we're in that thriving, then it's incorporating some of the behaviors that promote mental health, such as mindfulness, such as connecting with others, such as physical exercise. When we're unwell, not as easy to do. And so our starting point might be a little bit different. So it may be seeking professional support. Where somewhere in between, when we look at our mental health, we know that our thoughts sometimes are that culprit when we go back to that stress model, and maybe a tool or an intervention to help support your thoughts. And so the tool that I wanted to provide you guys today to take away with you, if you're finding yourself getting stuck in anxious or critical thoughts, is our ICE tool. So let's just briefly review that. Once again, this would be a tool that would be on our app that can be utilized. But it goes something like this. So ICE being the acronym, first thing we need to do is identify or name that anxious or critical thought. So I was working with an individual the other day, and there was a real sense of overwhelm, or this sense of lack of control and of failure of, in these conditions, how am I going to achieve my deliverables? How am I going to get this done given this current circumstance? So basically identify that anxious thought when we deducted it is basically, I am going to fail. Second step in this, we need to challenge that anxious thought. So first of all, is that a thought or a fact? I am going to fail. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know. It's very black and white as well, right? So there's certain styles of anxious thinking. So we identify that. Then we want to examine the evidence. Let's look at the evidence suggesting you're going to fail, because actually your targets are on with this individual. And when we looked at the work that was being contributed, we just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So it's a matter of identifying, challenging the thought a bit. And then the third step is exchanging it with a more balanced or more accurate thought. So it's not that positive Pollyanna, I'm going to be great, but it's what's more balanced and more realistic or accurate in this situation. So the thought changing to, this is a challenging situation. I'm going to focus on what's in my control. Okay. So we went from I'm going to fail to something that was a little bit more balanced. So for you, write these steps down, identify, challenge, exchange. And when you're noticing your thoughts, the very first step is really that awareness of it, and maybe use this tool to help you out with that. Okay, so that's the mental health. And I'll just pause there once again, just to see if there's any questions before I talk a little bit about some of these steps. Okay, not seeing anything in the chat, and then Amber, you'll pop on if there's any questions, so just let me know. So really, when we look at, and this information, it's how do we protect the mental health? It's having a mental health plan on a daily or weekly basis. And this information that we've put here, Bill Howitt, you may have heard of him. He's a thought leader in the mental health space, writes for the Globe and Mail, and just a great guy. He was on one of our podcasts. In addition to some of the information that we've collected, is really on a daily and weekly basis, having a plan around, okay, what's the physical health routine? So this week, I'm going to get out for 3 walks. Okay, so I'm making sure the physical health, it's so important for our mental health. There's a real correlation there. Daily mental fitness and resilience skills. So am I journaling? Am I practicing my mindfulness? Am I focusing on strengths or looking at what's good in the world? So those are 3 examples of something that I can use. And once again, through our program, there's a variety of different skills that we offer. Social connection. It's incredible. The isolation and the impacts of that on our health and on our mental health is pretty outstanding. So having a social connection plan. So for me, on my weekly basis, I've earmarked each week a friend or a family member that I don't interact with often that I'm connecting with. And I make sure that I do that to feel connected in addition to my own family. And then lastly, having that sense of purpose, right? So each week, it's really identifying what's my core contribution. So this week, last week, between the last 2 weeks, I've had about 10 webinars that I've given. So my core contribution is to provide some knowledge and some strategies to help people in the mental health space, as an example. But it can be something as, you know, I'm going to keep my environment tidy and clean, right? Just because that's going to help the clutter. So, you know, up to you for that.
Karen?
Yes.
You have a question.
Great.
So one of the attendees was asking, how do you come up with a more accurate or realistic or balanced thought if you are in crisis?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I think that's the thing is, it's looking at when you are in crisis, it's to acknowledge the emotional reaction that's going on in that scenario. But it's also looking at what mindset is going to actually best serve you. Okay, so we can be in crisis and we can be in various circumstances. And first of all, once again, when I hear the word crisis, I think of multiple things. There's a range for people. So first of all, get yourself safe. That's the very first most important thing, right? So if you're unable to come up with that balanced thought and you're feeling unsafe, you make sure you call the crisis distress line, or you call 911 if you're not feeling safe that way, or your environment is not safe. But I think it is, and once again, with these thoughts, I think in that moment to recognize this is a moment in time, right? The law of impermanence, this too shall pass, and really going into what resource can I use, what strength can I use of mine to help me through this situation. So that might be something just to stabilize it, but get yourself supported, especially when you're in that crisis situation. Yeah, great question. Yeah, and then experts say, thanks for that comment as well, social isolation, more harmful than cigarette smoking. There's, in terms of health issue, or sorry, cardiac disease. I mean, there's been some interesting studies on that. So yeah, the social isolation can do a real number on us. And that's the challenge with what we're facing right now. Yeah, great questions. Thanks, everybody out there, whoever you are. Okay, great. So mental health, we talked a little bit about that. We talked a little bit about resilience. Now I want to talk about, one of our other resilient skills, which is hardiness, and help you, hopefully through this section, help you develop a hardiness plan to help you navigate these uncertain and unpredictable times. And so hardiness in short term is really the ability to endure difficult conditions. It comes from the work of Suzanne Cabasa and later developed by Paul Baritone, who did a lot of work in the US military. Paul actually just published a book called Hardiness, and I'd highly recommend that if what I present here, if you're liking what you're hearing here. So Suzanne Cabasa, she basically studied groups and individuals and looked at what are the behaviors of individuals as they're enduring challenging situations. What are some of those protective factors and different things that they are doing, and came across a few different things. And so when we look at hardiness, they came up with the 3 C's of hardiness. So those high in hardiness have this level of commitment. So they know the why. They know why endure this difficult condition. They have a sense of control or agency over their environment. So they're clear on what they can't control, and they assert efforts over what they can. They're able to see the challenge in the situation, meaning the opportunity. So it's what's the opportunity for growth or learning in this situation? And then we've added a 4th bonus C, connect. And so it's really getting those resources around you. So I'm going to go through each one of these, and what I'd welcome you to do is develop your resilience plan. For whatever it is. So whether you have a specific challenge you're dealing with right now, or just in general, you can work through these 4 C's as I further explain them. So number 1, if we look at the difficult condition, if we look at commitment, it's really that idea of being clear on why you would endure this difficult condition. And so Simon Sinek's one of the thought leaders in finding your why, and he kind of has a formula that is around what is the core contribution we're making, and if we make that contribution, what impact could that have? So let's say it's a return to work scenario, and as we know, things are challenging, and so it's why do I go through the paces of this? But it's really looking at what's the contribution I can make here. Well, I can either help my industry, I can help my company, I can really make a difference with those around me. And by making that core contribution, what impact can that have? And so your starting point there. So as you think about your Headversity hardiness plan, think about why would you endure this difficult condition? What would be that core contribution as a start? Control. So this is really about looking at what is in our control and focusing 100% on those things. And typically it's anything inside our skin, right? It's the efforts we put into things, it's our thoughts, it's our attitudes, and it's our behaviors. And so with that individual I was speaking about who was just feeling overwhelmed and anxious about the environment and feeling like they may fail, it's really, where do the efforts need to be put? And it's, like I heard a quote, something about worrying is like a rocking chair. It feels like it's soothing you, but you're not getting anywhere, right? You're just kind of staying in that same position. So it's a matter of putting my efforts on the work or on the support that I require. Thoughts, we talked a bit about that, but it's what's the mindset I need for this situation? What's the attitude I'm going to bring? And so with this individual, instead of focusing on what could be lost, looking at what can be gained. So having that growth mindset or that attitude of what's the opportunity within this. And then the behaviors. I need to do this, and this week in order to be at my best, right? So that's an idea of with a control. So thinking about within your control plan, what that may look like for you. Challenge. So our mindset will go in a variety of ways. And so the amygdala in our brain that scans the world for threat and danger, right now, unpredictability, uncertainty, it's going to be lit up. So we also need to balance that with, well, what are some of the opportunities? And, working in sport and working in a variety, we've brought communities together, the world. This is the first time we've really all had to fly information. So we're seeing some really cool things. And so with the challenge, for you, it's looking at what opportunity does this challenge present for your growth and learning. So maybe you've had to adopt some new technologies or way of being in this brave new workplace. Or maybe you've had to work through some of your own emotional reactions and develop some new skills. And maybe you've sought out a therapist or a counselor, or maybe you're just developing skills, right? So opportunities in that way. So thinking about what opportunities this situation presents for yourself. And then lastly, connect. And the thing on this one, when you look at the resilience science, so it's a fellow named Mustafa Sakar out of the UK, amazing, brilliant man, and just a big sweetheart. So in his research, what they found is it's not the supports that are around you, it's your perception of support and matching your supports with the right individual. So I almost think of it in my mind, it's like this internal board of directors. So I have this internal board of directors, and I think about the different needs I have. So I'm going to have emotional needs where I just need to vent to someone. I'm going to have technical needs where I need to figure out how do I approach this situation in terms of my work. I may have financial and budgetary, and how do I balance things in that way? And so my poor husband, sometimes I'll use him for all those things. And when I'm trying to work through a work problem, he doesn't know, and we both get frustrated. So it's a matter of matching the right support to the right individual. So now I have, my internal board of directors that I have an individual slotted for each of those needs. They don't know they're on my board of directors, but I call them up when needed. So that's an example of create your team, get connected with who may be of value to you. All right, a little bit about Headversity. As we said, we have this 6-point training program, all broken down into micro learning, because we know that's how people learn these days. So 22 lessons within this 6-point curriculum. We have a variety of different learning modalities, 150 videos, short and long form articles, etc. So to meet today's learner. And so once again, it is meant to measure. So we have a validated resilience measure, so you can see where your resilience is at, to track where you're at. And so through our algorithm, it'll point you in the right direction to the lessons. You can also choose your own adventure to train these skills up. And you know, for anyone who's on this panel, if you're interested in that, we'd be happy to offer a free trial. And so if you're interested in that for your organization, then feel free to just head over to me at Karen@headversity.com, and we'd be happy to set that up for you. So at this point, I've made it, I made it, you know, close to the hour so that we could have a little bit of time for questions. So I'll just pause there and see if anybody has any questions, comments, concerns.
I'm just looking at the chat, Karen. No questions so far, but as we wait a little bit longer, I just want to thank you as well for giving your time and sharing with us all some really great tools and things to be aware of when we're returning to the office, you know, whenever that may be for everyone on this webinar. But some really great tools, and I love your idea of the internal board of directors. That's wonderful. I'm gonna use that a lot. It looks like Heather is asking about the subscription for Headversity.
Yeah, so as I said, just send me an email at Karen@headversity.com, and then I can send you some more information of how that works. So basically, we do work with organizations and bringing it in through that way. So yeah, you can just contact me, and I'll be happy to send you more information.
Awesome.